South,
Yes.
and I properly referred to him.
Right.
But I might also make reference to him as former Minister for Small Business in Barbados, because he is fast developing a reputation of having resiled himself from the responsibility of seeing after the interests of small business persons. So is it true, Mr. Speaker, that in recent times he has been publicly spoken of as having signaled a crackdown on small business people operating in the retail sector in Barbados? Is it true? Is it true? Is that true, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, I am not going to sit here and allow the honourable member to mislead this House.
What's the point of order, honourable member?
Mr. Speaker, the point of order, I have not signaled any crackdown on any small businesses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I have signaled is the empowerment and the formalizing the structures and the policies for small businesses so they can take their rightful place in the economic landscape of this country.
But
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member is misleading the chamber. There's no crackdown.
honourable member, if I may interject, can you turn off your mic? If I could bring some balance. The honourable member for St. Michael West posed a question. It is whether rhetorical or not. Just want to bring that to your attention. Continue, honourable member.
And so with your leave, I'll repeat the question. Is it true that it has been said of the honourable member, and widely and publicly so in Barbados, that he has signaled a crackdown on people in the small shops business in Barbados? Is it true? Is it true that it has been said of the honourable member for St. George South, the former Minister for Small Business in Barbados, that though speaking of a good thing with reference to a prices registry in Barbados, he related those remarks only so to mini-marts in Barbados and not necessarily the biggest supermarkets? But is it true? If that is true, one can understand why people will think that he has resiled himself from that responsibility which was given to him with reference to small businesses in Barbados. Is it true further through, Mr. Speaker, that it is even now being widely said of him that he has signaled a crackdown on small and used car dealers in Barbados? Is it true? Now, if that is true, one can easily understand why people would think he has abandoned those responsibilities and the interests of people who fall into that small business sector with respect to used cars and so forth. Now, Mr. Speaker, one can talk of leveling the playing field. And one might use the analogy of cricket, as the honourable member for St. George South did. But we got to be very careful when we're talking about these things called playing fields. The majority of people in Barbados, not privileged necessarily, many underprivileged, in fact, take part in sports, football, cricket. They play on fields. A lot of those fields are largely unkept or unkept. They are sub-quality. You know that very well, Mr. Speaker. But there are others of us who play, as you well know, Mr. Speaker, other sports on other fields, like polo, like golf. Those fields and those courses are well kept, well manicured. So when you talk about leveling the playing field, you've got to be careful what sport you're talking about and what class of people you're talking about. So be more specific with me when you start to talk about leveling the playing field. Now, fair competition is quite fine, and we need to have that. We need to have fair competition in the market. But I often wonder, why is it that when we come to the matter of fair competition and adjustments must be made, the adjustments must always be made by those who are on the smaller side of the business rather than those who are on the bigger interest side of business. So when adjustments are to be made, it is easy to identify the smaller players, the smaller business people, the smaller enterprises, to make those adjustments. But the big players can have their way. And when the forces that obtain in the market do not seem to serve the interests of the bigger players, they complain to the powers that be and seek for adjustments to be made so that those market dynamics can be stifled. That's the reality, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. It is the reality elsewhere. It is the reality in Barbados that big players, because of their influence, and they do have the wherewithal, and that wherewithal is not only always capital, they do have the wherewithal to influence power, such that when adjustments have to be made, the hammer is made to fall on those who are the smaller players in the business. Now, we can try to manage the message. We can try to walk back things that we have said or done. We can try to undo the damage by managing the message and extending our influence over the media to carry that message. But at the end of the day, Barbadians come face to face with the reality which they know. And that is that often too much disadvantage is served to those who are already disadvantaged because of their small size and their more localized interests. I feel very strongly about these things. So I must raise them. So fair competition is all right. But why must always the adjustments be made on the side of those who are the smaller players in the game? And the level playing field is desirable, but we got to be careful what field we're talking about, what sports, and who are the players in those sports. All of us don't play golf, and all of us don't play polo. Some of us know only cricket and only football. And I think you come from that cricketing crowd and that footballing community, Mr. Speaker. And that's where I am with that. We have a problem, Mr. Speaker, and I want to take this opportunity to speak to it, in eastern Barbados, rural Barbados. And that has to do with water. That has to do with water. That has to do with water supply, water availability, access to water for poor people on the eastern side of Barbados, particularly so. And I cannot, for the life of me, understand how, if one does not have access to a supply, to a service, which a company is contracted to provide, how one, in the absence of the supply, of the service, of the water in this case, can continue to be billed and to receive exorbitant billing values for a service that they don't receive. Now, really, that is something that has to be dealt with. It is one thing to wrestle to the ground the challenges of supplying the water, where the problems have to do with mains or drought or what have you. It is another thing, and to me, it's a far easier thing to be able to correct a situation where if people are not being fed with the service and getting the water, they should not be getting the bills. And the bills certainly should not be out of whack. Now, you cannot tell me that in 2020, we can't treat to a situation like that. Tell me that the challenges of providing and supplying the water are humongous, they're big, they're major. Tell me that you need some time to deal with them. More than the 2 years you've had. Tell me that if you want to. That's one argument. But tell me, what is the problem? What is the challenge to be found in the fact that when people in St. John and St. Joseph and certain parts of St. Andrew and St. Thomas can't get water, but you get the billings, and the billings reflect values that are out of whack with any kind of reality, even if you were getting the supply, and you're not getting the supply. Now, those are issues that we have to deal with. Now, it is indeed one thing to talk about the renewable energy sector. Question is, what in tangible and practical terms are you doing about it that will benefit the majority of Barbadians, that will allow for the coming into the field of new players in the field who are not those regarded as the traditionally privileged and blessed, the well-endowed, the well-resourced. It is one thing to talk about a renewable energy policy. It is one thing to provide for legislation, enact legislation that would facilitate ratings and stuff like that. That is all right. We can identify the benefits. We can list the benefits to be derived. We can provide for the fixing of rates. We can provide for accommodation of the sector in the legislation that we are enacting. Oh, that's good. But what, at the end of the day, are we doing in practical terms to facilitate the emergence of that new sector with more players in the sector, apart from those who are already blessed and privileged or who come from abroad? So we hear of a $320 million renewable energy project somewhere in St. Thomas or wherever. We hear about that. But and that is fine. We need that. I suppose that level of investment, let me be clear to say, we need that level of investment. But we need also to accommodate smaller business people, non-traditional players in a new sector, so that we may continue the business of economic democracy in Barbados and not just talk about it. And that's where I come from, and that's where I stand. I was quite interested in hearing, and I really look for a bit of clarification. The minister said that he and his honorable colleague responsible for energy have started some co-op in their ministry. I didn't understand that. I do not understand that entirely. And I hope for some further clarification, because that, if left like that, raises a lot of questions. And I would encourage him to revisit that statement and clarify that, just as he's been trying to clarify or walk back his other statements of late. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. So, Mr. Speaker, all I want to say today is this. We can identify those benefits associated with the renewable energy sector. We can provide for legislation that would allow us to fix the rates. We can provide a legislation that will now accommodate, mention and reference to that emerging sector. But we need to do more in practical terms to establish that sector, especially against a goal of 2030. We need to do more in practical terms to develop that sector. And as we do that more, it must not be an accommodation of the traditional privileged class, whether local, domestic, or coming from abroad, to invest in that sector. But we must see how we can have other players in Barbados invested in that sector to expand economic privilege to a wider pool of Barbadians. And when we talk about that level playing field, let us be careful that we are sure to let people know exactly which field we're talking about and exactly which players we're talking about. Because I don't know if you play golf. I suspect you don't, Mr. Speaker. I don't. I don't know if you play polo. I suspect you don't, and I don't, Mr. Speaker. But I am sure, being a Cormier boy, you played cricket. And if you grew up anywhere around Halls Road or Eagle Hall or Waterford, you played football. So I am on the same field as you are. I'm on the same field as you are. And we are accustomed to understanding that when we play, the field is not always level. There are a little bit of bumps here, but we make do. So when you're talking about level the playing field, let me know which field you're talking about. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to rise in this debate and to lend my full support to this utility bill and the fair trading legislation that is taking us another critical step forward in our renewable energy revolution. I want to start by thanking the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, who has responsibility for energy in this country, and his partnership with the Honourable Member for St. George South, who brought these bills before this august body for us to do something for the benefit of all Barbadians, large and small. I want to thank the leadership of the Honourable Member for St. Michael North East in giving the leadership to both members in planning out what I consider to be the renewable energy revolution, which in truth and in fact, Mr. Speaker, is going to take Barbados a considerable way down the road in relation to its economic development, its economic transformation, and its enfranchisement of the ordinary Barbadian in Barbados. This is why I rise to support it. Contrary to the concerns that were raised, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure this country that the Barbados Labour Party supports, embraces, drives, leads that which will empower every single Barbadian who has the honor to be a part of this wonderful little nation. And I want to explain why I say this. First of all, the advent of renewable energy and the way in which it's being rolled out in the world actually shifts the dynastic economic stronghold that has taken control of energy across the world from the time energy was introduced into our world. The advent of energy was a watershed moment that changed forever the lives of human beings across this planet. It therefore enabled an economic revolution that caused a fast tracking of economic development for countries that were able to embrace electricity. But it would always be, in that particular form, controlled by large players. Because it would be controlled by large players, and because it would have been driven by fossil fuel, and fossil fuel is not something that can be mined by the ordinary citizen of the world. The small person of the world cannot do anything with fossil fuel energy. It takes people with billions of dollars to be able to mine that resource and convert it into energy. And Mr. Speaker, with the advent of the renewable energy revolution, what we are seeing is a situation where we're shifting the control of energy out of the hands of the huge players and allowing smaller, more diverse, more numeric persons to get involved in the production of energy. So it shifts that stronghold. It also, like the advent of fossil fuel, will release tremendous economic growth for countries that are able to embrace it and disseminate it across their populations. It will also provide for the first time energy security. And so, in my presentation today, I want to address those three things so that we're able to appreciate the power of this revolution. It's not a change, it's a revolution. First of all, to look at the democratization of energy. The Honourable Member for St. George South shared with this chamber that at the heart of our embrace of renewable energy is our determination for the participation of small players within this new sector. And much work has been done, initiatives have been started, and those will be spoken to by the Honourable Member who has the honour to lead in the energy sector. But projects have been started to engage small players in the generation of renewable energy. It also allows not just small renewable energy producers to get involved in the business and the entrepreneurship of producing and providing the solar energy that people will need to use or buy and do the installations. It doesn't only empower small businesses, it empowers the householder themselves. So here is an energy that moves from the top all the way to the bottom. And we have been determined as a government to ensure that everyone can participate in this. And as the Honourable Member for St. George South said, that the ordinary householder can get involved through the rental of their roof, through the purchase of the system, generate electricity not only for themselves, but to sell to the grid. Now, understand the economic power of that particular move. Just think of the fact that if a household is able to produce that energy, and out of producing it, they're able to take off what they're currently paying for electricity. So immediately they remove $200 from their household expenses. And imagine that they're able to produce additional power that may net them $300 in additional income from the distribution company. That means that that household now has $500 of disposable income that it would not ordinarily have been able to either retain from the electric bill or to generate from their roof. Because we are committed to the dispersion of renewable energy across the entire spectrum of Barbados, it means that we are aiming to ensure that thousands of households are able to obtain access to renewable energy, particularly solar. So if we were able to allow 20,000 households in this country to be able to produce solar energy, and through that they were able to provide for themselves an extra $500 a month, we are speaking about releasing $10 million per month into the Barbadian economy, which is $120 million in more consumer spending in the economy. That is transformational. Transformational. Because that spending will support small businesses. It will support new businesses. It will give more spending power to the consumer that they can satisfy and meet the needs of the members of their household. That $500 a month will make a tremendous difference. So the democratization of energy will actually transform the spending power of Barbadians. But it does not stop there. Energy security is vital in this world. Mr. Speaker, nations engage in a lot of political jousting for position, for power, for influence, and they use whatever is at their disposal to do that, to be able to impose their will on others, to be able to secure for their citizens, sometimes at the expense of other people's citizens, what they want or what they need. And small nations like ours are always locked in battles in various arenas, trying to get the knee from off of our necks so that we can open a path for our country and our citizens to make a living in a highly competitive global environment. So energy security is important because who provides you with energy can control you. Those who provide the energy, should something happen to them and you are dependent on them, something will happen to you. And Barbados knows this only too well. Because back from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, this is what we experience. We, as a nation, sit and plan our economic strategy, use our resources, and try to put in place that which will bring prosperity to our nation and to our citizens, to provide education and healthcare, etc. Mr. Speaker, it only takes for oil prices to shoot up by $10, $15 a barrel to skin the entire apple cart upside down. And we are powerless. We have no power to change that impact because the increase in the price of oil is going to immediately translate into increases in every single thing that we use, every product that we consume, everything we import into this nation. And from the time a product goes up in price, it means that your foreign exchange can no longer stretch in the way it needs to stretch in order to provide for the everyday needs of citizens. So energy security is absolutely vital for us. So when the giants of oil are playing games, when they are wrestling with each other for dominance, blades of grass like us get crushed in those games. If the price goes up and inflation sets in, it drives back the prosperity of every single Barbadian citizen because it's more expensive to live. It makes it hard for them to look after their children, to give their children what they need for schooling, for food, for clothing, for shelter, and opportunity to succeed. It affects that. The other situation is when prices drop tremendously, that too has an impact. If you're like Trinidad, an oil producer, and the price of oil drops, Crapo will smoke Trinidad's pipe. Because Trinidad would have been banking on its earnings to be able to take care of their citizens. Guyana, who is looking towards oil to be able to deliver an unprecedented level of quality of life for the average Guyanese, a severe drop in price will smoke their pipe. And if Barbados, with its own oil reserves, if the price of oil drops too low, the opportunity for us to convert our potential reserves into economic benefits for every citizen in this country, we will not be able to achieve that objective. So in truth and in fact, a reliance on fossil fuel puts us in a situation of energy insecurity. This is why the wisdom of our administration, led by the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, to lead Barbados regardless of whether it finds oil or not into a renewable energy revolution, is the safest, most practical, far-reaching position that needs to be taken to safeguard our future from the insecurity of energy. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we walk this road towards our own energy security, because it will take us out from the shocks. It will reduce one of the shocks that can be administered to our economy should something happen in terms of fossil fuel. And that is why this is important, because it will protect the small man. It will protect the average citizen. It will protect our economy to have energy security where we are producing our own renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, it's a revolution. But it does not stop there. We not only have the democratization of energy, we not only have energy security, we also have the opportunity for reforming, transforming, and restructuring the Barbadian economy. Very often you will hear people talk about our dependence on tourism and we should get away from it, as though you could take it and throw it out the window. You cannot. What we must do is we must add other sectors, other ways of earning money to add to our pot as opposed to subtracting. But how does our renewable energy revolution assist us to do that transformation and generate the economic growth and give us more economic resilience by bringing more sectors into play and increasing the competitiveness of certain sectors so that we're able to be globally competitive? It would have been shared already with the Chamber that the capacity of earning or of producing our own energy will save foreign exchange earnings. And we were told in this chamber that it would save us, once we come to full capacity, it would save us something like $700 million in fuel imports, which tends to consume a great deal of the foreign exchange reserves of Barbados. In the Ministry of Foreign Trade, where we monitor what is happening in terms of trade, how much Barbados is exporting, how much it's importing, what it is earning, and what it is not earning, Barbados benefits and has a surplus with most countries with which it trades in CARICOM. We earn more from them than they earn from us. This is why CARICOM and CSME is important. The only countries that we do not have a surplus with would be Trinidad and Bahamas, because we have had to buy and purchase our fuel from them, and we are in deficit because the cost of fuel puts us at a serious disadvantage. So what would happen if we were able to remove that cost? Barbados would be in a major surplus position right here among its CARICOM members, because it would have energy independence and energy security. But it does more. The access to energy that is affordable, and that is secure, and that is consistent will transform a number of things in the economy. Post-COVID, let me dial back. Because before COVID, from the time we arrived in office, the focus of this government has been to move towards food security, because we recognize how vulnerable we are in that area. And we've had an excellent job by the honorable member for St. Philip South in taking agriculture forward with the aim to allow Barbados to be able to produce more of what it is consuming and reducing the high level of imports. Growing the food is just one step of that game. The second step to our food security is being able to shift to agro-processing. But to shift to agro-processing requires that we have the inputs and the volume that we can produce where the price is competitive. Because if we produce a can of tomato sauce and it is going to cost the consumer $7, while an imported can of tomato sauce from elsewhere that has a better competitive advantage when it comes to manufacturing and processing, and they can import and sell it at $3.75, then the consumer is going to gravitate towards the import and not buy the local good or product. And one of the things that we have been at a severe disadvantage on in Barbados is our capacity to be competitive when it comes to production and manufacturing. Why? Because to succeed in processing, to succeed in production and manufacturing, there are three main things that you need, four main things that you need. Land, it has to be available, there has to be enough of it, and it has to be affordable. Labor, it must be skilled at the necessary levels for your production, and it must also be affordable. Capital, you must have the capacity to go to a finance institution and be able to get loans or to get investments to be able to start your agro-processing or to start your production and have it, the cost of your money has to be something that you can afford. The interest rates and the terms and conditions of the loan or terms and conditions of the investment must be supportive of your prosperity. And the fourth one is the cost of energy. One of the reasons why Trinidad has been able to be dominant within CARICOM and to be able to trade up and down the region and establish themselves in every part of the Caribbean, even with the opening of Guyana, Trinidad, because of its dominance in energy, which has been able to support them in manufacturing and producing, has allowed them to move with quick dispatch onto the Guyanese landscape. And there are over 800 Trinidadian businesses in Guyana establishing themselves to be a part of the oil boom and the economic growth that is going to be generated there. 800. Barbados does not yet have 50, to my knowledge. So that is of concern to me in the area of foreign trade. But if you are able to get access to energy, a cheap supply, a sufficient supply, then you can look to begin to work on production so that you can build up ability in that area and drive some economic growth. So what will this do? This will help to forge the way for new manufacturers of various goods in Barbados who will be able to produce and be competitive. Now, we won't be able to do everything, but the higher level production capabilities that our skills can manage and that our labor costs can carry with available energy at a reasonable cost, Barbados is going to be able to pursue production and pursue agro-processing. What will that mean? It means that we can participate fully, without hesitation, in the program that is being designed by the CARICOM private sector organization. They were tasked by the leader of the CSME, who is the Honorable Member for St. Michael Northeast, to develop a program for CARICOM as to how we can replace as much as $450 million worth of imported food products into CARICOM so that it can give our countries a fighting chance to save foreign exchange, but more importantly, generate investment and generate jobs for our people. And so if we are able to participate in that movement, Barbados could see itself getting involved in agro-processing in a number of products, which we will be able not only to consume domestically on our tables on Sunday in our homes, but should be consumed in our hotels when tourism begins to recover and rebound again. We need to be able to negotiate and get those products into the tourism product, and then to be able to export across the region to other territories using the benefits of the common external tariff and giving ourselves the opportunity to sell goods into the OECS, Guyana, and beyond. And what would that mean? If we can save the $700 million in fuel imports, that is money that foreign exchange that we don't have to look for. If we can use the energy to start producing goods and reduce our own import bill and create jobs for people, that is at least another $100 million that we can generate right there by reducing the imports into Barbados. Mr. Speaker, that is an $800 million benefit to the Barbadian economy. That is not to be sneezed at. That will make a tremendous difference to freeing up space for Barbados to support and invest in other areas that will take our society forward, to be able to invest more in the social sector, to invest more in the economic sector. This is what it will do: produce economic growth in this country. Who will this affect? Mr. Speaker, as I move through my constituency, I have the privilege of engaging young people. I have the privilege of engaging middle-aged people, all of them with dreams, who want to start a small business, but they want to make it grow. They want to be able to succeed. But the landscape can be so tight when it comes to the cost of doing business, when it comes to the cost of finance and access to finance, when it comes to opportunities for export, that some are discouraged from taking the step because they don't have the confidence that they can succeed. When we are able to provide energy at a price that is affordable, it gives them a greater opportunity to be successful. And I want to explain how that can work as well. Take, for example, in tourism. Tourism doesn't only have big players. It doesn't only have the big chains. Our tourism product has small Barbadian players. And one of the costs that makes it really difficult for them in business is the cost of energy and the cost of water. And because of how we've had to structure our prices in terms of water and in terms of electricity for commercial use, it has made it difficult for many of those operations to have enough maneuvering room when it comes to pricing. Therefore, when there are changes externally in the tourism market and they need to be able to shift their price to be able to hold their market, they are unable to do that without endangering the longevity of their business, the survival of their business, because there's a point beyond which they cannot go. But if we are able to allow them to be able to produce energy, if they're able to buy affordable energy from off of the grid, you give them more room to be able to shift as dynamics shift around them so that they can stay in the tourism game and not have an overpriced product, but a product that can be competitive with some of the best in the world. So it will transform tourism. It will do more. Barbados has spoken about a 24-hour economy. A 24-hour economy means having businesses open, some businesses open 24 hours. Now, why do we need that? If you do not have enough land, it is important that you are able to use your existing space more efficiently. So instead of a manufacturing plant operating from 7 in the morning and closing at 5 in the evening, you can have a 24-hour operation that goes all night long. What does that mean? Without investing in more equipment, without investing in more space, you can double your labor and you can double or even triple your output on the same investment. The returns on investment will improve. And it means that we can engage in manufacturing in such a way as not to put at risk using up a lot of land that we do not have. Because that's the challenge we have with a small land space, Mr. Speaker. So a 24-hour economy is going to help Barbados to broaden its engagement in production. Now, once you start to do that, what now needs to happen? Your polyclinics, for the benefit of the MP for the city, your polyclinics operating 24 hours now will have business all night, all morning, all afternoon, all midday, and will be able to spread out its service over a wider period. And what does that do to transform the economy? I'll share it with you, Mr. Speaker. The productivity of the economy jumps up. Because when you have a worker that has to go to a polyclinic, they make an appointment, and they're all given an appointment for 9 o'clock in the morning. They go to the polyclinic and sit down. They're going to be there the whole day. If they have 3 children, and the 3 children see 3 different doctors, that's 3 different times they have to go and do this exercise. While they're there, they're not going to be paid. And the end result is that that home will lose income, which means their spending will be down. So the shops that rely on that woman are going to find that their income drops if you have more and more people sitting on a polyclinic bench. That connection has to be made. But once we spread out the 24-hour polyclinic and people can come in their off time and you can spread out the load, they can get in and get out quickly and go back to what they're doing. But what will happen if you open that 24 hours? What happens if you open a production facility 24 hours? You need transport 24 hours too, sir. You need food for snacks. So people need to produce food at night.
You gotta remember has 2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. And you also will need other services, whether it's pharmacies or whatever. So what happens now is that more businesses can open because the person who sells food in the morning may not want to do it at night. So a new set of entrepreneurs can come on and be able to make food from that 24-hour economy. But we cannot do that successfully unless we have access to energy, renewable energy, competitively priced energy, that we are going to be able to build out this economy. So, sir, it is absolutely transformative. And just by managing this particular process of our renewable energy revolution, this bill that is here today, the wonderful work that has been done already, which I'm sure we'll hear about it just now, all of this is going to take Barbados forward and help in the restructuring of the Barbadian economy. This will produce the jobs. This will produce hope for young people. This will broaden access to entrepreneurs getting into the economic environment. And Mr. Speaker, this is going to take Barbados well into the 21st century, being able to be a global player by maximizing the opportunities that are being provided by the renewable energy revolution. So, Mr. Speaker, I am thankful for the time that you've given me, and I want to sincerely applaud this utility bill and the FTC legislation, and to applaud all of my colleagues who have contributed to this renewable energy revolution in Barbados. It will do Barbados a great deal of good. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this sitting be suspended until 2:15 p.m.
Question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.